Sejam muito bem-vindos e muito bem-vindas a mais um The Hub Talks. Estamos aqui hoje com o Greg Hoffman para mais um episódio em inglês. Então, se você ainda não tá com o inglês perfeito, pode abrir o seu Duolingo. Brincadeira, esse não é um episódio patrocinado. Mas abre o seu YouTube, que lá no YouTube a gente tá com o episódio legendado. Você pode ativar as legendas em português. But for whoever do speak English, it is a pleasure having you here for our The Hub Talks episode with Greg Hoffman. So, Greg, it is a pleasure having you here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me and for all the hospitality the last week. It's been amazing.
Thank you so much. Quick run through why Greg is here with us today. You have participated in the RISE MBA program and did the challenge working with Vita here at the Hub. So we'll go through that in about a second, but just a little background on Greg. He comes from the oil and gas industry, has over 6 years of experience, and suddenly decided that doing an MBA sounded like a good idea.
Yeah,
So
I was sleeping too much. So
I see you don't have kids then.
I do not.
Okay, but I know that some people in the program do have kids, and I wonder how they juggle that around.
Yeah, it's got to be impossible.
So how's the MBA been going? Why did you decide to join in, and do you feel like it's already like giving fruits?
Yeah, I would say absolutely. I mean, I think coming from as an engineer with a technical background, I really wanted to get my MBA just to see, everything's a business. So your technical skills, how those translate to the bottom line and fully understanding the entire project value chain is something I was seeking by doing so, by getting my MBA. And I probably underestimated how quickly the impact would sink in. But I just find, anytime I see a business, kind of my first question is like, well, what are their variable costs? What are their fixed costs? I'm doing what one of our professors would call low tech, simple business math. And it's always just evaluating. And I think one of the cool things, like as an engineer, I may be a little biased. I always thought that, given the physics and the chemistry and everything, really got to understand how the world works. But in reality, at a much more macro level, business, you get to see how the world works, how money moves around and how economies are structured and things like that.
Funny thing, my brother comes from the engineering sector, and perhaps he shares the same views. Like I do get how the world works, and I just go to him like, yeah, but you may get the world, but you don't understand humanity, because
Yeah.
that's a whole other variable in itself. So humans are complex creatures in
Incredibly.
themselves, right? So perhaps you've discovered some of that during the MBA program.
Yeah, I mean, it's been I think one of the impactful things outside of like the finance and accounting skills or things like that is like both introspectively and through like your interactions with this 65 person cohort, you learn a lot about people and how different people view problems and how different people think. And then you really learn a lot about yourself. And I think, like you said, humans are very complex, both other people and we're also internally very complex. And so you really start to, push the boundaries of how you think. And there are definitely times where you are a bit frustrated and, ready to, just you're tired and you're
Yeah.
stressed. And so but you have to, learn what's making you feel that way and how do you overcome that and how do you push through. And I think a really impactful thing that I had really underestimated was just like learning about how you manage people and how, how you behave in a team setting. Because in a professional setting at work, like you're very, or at least myself, I tend to be very like composed and I maybe withhold some opinions. Whereas in this business school, I've found I'm, much more forthright with my opinions and expressive, and you think about how the things you're saying are being perceived, and it's just it's been really interesting because we work in a like similar to this team, we also work in another team throughout the entire first year.
Okay.
And so you get into a lot of debates, and everybody has a vision for how the team should be structured, how the assignments should go, and so yeah, it's definitely been more of an introspective process than I realized it was going to be, but it's been really good for me as well.
So team working can be hard.
Definitely, definitely. And yeah.
Are you not used to working in teams then?
No, I work pretty at work. I tend to work in teams a lot. I think maybe it's just a different environment. I think because I'm relatively early in my career, um, I haven't had as many, say, leadership roles. Whereas kind of in like these individual teams, like it's open-ended and whoever wants to assume certain positions. And really it kind of comes down to you have five people who are all leaders and all tend to be type A personality. So everyone has opinions and
Yeah.
just figuring out how to manage that has been really helpful.
Oh, interesting. But one of the things that you mentioned from team working is that all of you have different views and
Hmm.
different backgrounds and different opinions, which
Yeah.
can be good. At the same time, you all come from different backgrounds that lead you to have different problem viewing, problem solving skills.
Right.
And from engineering to lawyer, I think that we do face problems very differently.
Hmm.
Do you feel like that has been in play during the program, during the team working? And do you feel that if it was in play, that it was helpful?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think you maybe alluded to it when you talked about your brother, but engineers tend to not only do they think a certain way, they think that's the only way.
They think a certain way, and that's the certain way of doing
Yes,
things.
exactly. Um, and so I think I definitely probably share that bias. And I think working with other people and seeing it's made me recognize that I tend to have that bias. And that's important. I mean, the first step to changing is being aware of it. But more so, like I think it's more just enhanced my ability to think critically and think creatively. I've worked with Jeffrey now for a year, and he's a marketing like a VP of marketing, and I'm an engineer, and so we think very differently. But like, it's not that one is right or wrong. It's that like the answer is probably somewhere in the middle, and like not that I'll ever develop the marketing skills that he has or he'll ever develop the engineering skills that I have. But I hope, by the end of this experience, I've been able to take a little bit from everyone I've interacted with and just made myself a more well-rounded person, both personally and professionally.
I'm happy for you, and I'm happy that you found middle ground in it, especially because you've been working on a project or a challenge, whatever you want to call it. I think like if you call it a challenge, you do feel the weight of it, and if you call
Yeah.
it a project, it feels lighter. So let's call it a project. So
Yeah.
you've been working with a legal design project that's all about a company that found middle ground between two things that usually wouldn't mix. So
Hmm.
law and design are two separate worlds
Yeah.
in themselves. And I think before people started doing it, particularly for me, before I saw how Vita does it, it was very hard to see that middle ground. But as far as you've come, would you say that in your experience and the contact that you've had with Lego design and or projects and products, do you think that this is a good middle ground for people?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think like I remember an experience early in my career when I was just an intern, and I was doing a final project or challenge, and I I was giving the presentation to, people of different disciplines. And I asked the senior engineer that was mentoring me, like one of the things was struggling with was I was people who, explaining something to people who didn't have a background in engineering. And
Yeah.
so at times it could be frustrating. And he said something to me that's like, I've always, it's stuck with me throughout my career is like, that your job is to explain technical things to non-technical people.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the beauty of visual law. And truthfully, in like in a professional setting, your currency is your ability to explain something very complex to somebody who has no background in it. And I think visual law, bridges that gap in a really compelling way, because no one really a- understands the law, but it's so important to understand your rights and what you're signing. And any kind of thing that can translate this technical legal jargon and, contract or et cetera into something that is easily digestible and people can fully, and it's still a legally binding document. I mean, I think it's really incredible.
Oh, I'm happy to hear that. Greg, you came all the way from Houston, but you're originally from New Orleans, and I
I'm
know
actually from Houston, or
you're actually from
I'm
Houston.
born and raised in Houston, but live in New Orleans now.
Okay. So living in New Orleans, and just for fun, and because we're in Brazil, I know you have a very traditional party in New Orleans.
Yeah.
And would you say that can compare to Brazilian Carnival at all?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was definitely I wasn't expecting. I figured they were on par with one another. But when we've seen the pictures of the floats and we did a samba class yesterday and talked about Carnival and I've been amazed at the size of the floats and just how yeah, I mean, it's grandiose. It's pretty incredible.
Perhaps we should do some exchange programs where we go to Mardi
Yeah,
Gras and people come to Carnival,
I
just so
like
that we
that.
have the
Yeah,
experiences, right? Why choose one when you can have both?
that's right. That's right. There's beauty in everything.
Just like legal design. Why choose law when you can have, or design when you can have both?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Greg, it has been a huge pleasure having you here today. And I'd like to thank you so much, not only for your time for this podcast, but also for participating in this project. And for all our audience that accompanied us all the way through the episode, it has also been a pleasure having you here today. E para os brasileiros que ficaram até o final, ou os nossos portugueses hablantes, é um prazer ter vocês aqui para mais um episódio do The Hub Talks.